Well, looking around this awesome group, I know so many, from just the conversations we've had, we all have a profound appreciation for the genius of coaching. And it's been over 22 years now that I have heard stories about Coach Van Diest. Travis Honor was one of the star cornerbacks for Carroll College. He married my sister. So I was thinking about this morning some of those stories. One that I recall was they ran a play on offense, and Mike Van Diest was so disgusted with it that he's like, "Run it again." And Travis said his eyes just lit up like saucers. And he knew the exact where the ball was going to go, an exact time, and he said he just laid that guy out. They had a friendly competition between the two. And I just have heard so many stories, and it's just an honor and a pleasure to introduce a man that I've come to admire and know for so many years. He's a real gritty East Helena guy who played college football for the University of Wyoming. And he said in his own words, he came to Helena and made football king. And that was also coupled with a lot of Helena Capital state championships at the same time. I Googled just this morning, who's won the most national championships as a head coach. And, of course, the great Alabama coaches came up, Coach Bryant and Nick Sabin. But there's one other guy that's in that elite group, and we're so honored to have him here. And I really appreciate just not only that he's won 6 national championships, but just the core values that he carried with those kids, working with those kids through the years. So help me to welcome to the humble little stage, Coach Mike Van Diest.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks for taking time and let me come up and just share a few things with you today. And this is really informal, so if you got a question or something that you want to, bring up, I said over there, sometimes I go off in tangents. I got notes. I usually try not to use them very often. It's not my cheat sheets. I didn't fold it up so I can read it. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about coaching, and the topic when Matthew talked to me about it, I said, show up every day. And I've tried to do that beyond coaching as a parent, as a husband, things that my life is built around. I was very blessed to have 2 great parents, and I learned an awful lot from them. My dad worked for the railroad and never graduated, didn't graduate from high school and went to the service. World War II, my mom graduated from Rugby High School in North Dakota, never went to college, moved here. They got married in 1950. My mom was one of the hardest working persons I've ever been around. She was a waitress at the 4B's Cafe, which was down on Last Chance Gulch. And she was voted like the best waitress 2 or 3 years in a row in Helena. She just had a tremendous work ethic. And my dad and my mom, the first house they bought was in East Helena. It was an $11,000 house over on Clark Street in East Helena, 1955. And so times have really changed, but I learned so much from them. And at the same time, we all, going through our parents, sometimes we don't listen to our parents, we don't listen to our teachers, we don't listen to our coaches till later in life. And that's how things happened with me. A lot of things resonated with me when I became a coach. And I didn't want to become a coach. I never became a coach until a year after I was out of college. We're back here. I'm working at the YMCA as a fitness director down at the local YMCA. I'm running some different ski fitness groups, heart rehab groups for patients, and doing some things. And one Saturday, my dad said, "Hey, a lot of your friends are playing at Carroll that were a couple years younger. Let's go to a Carroll College game." So we went to a Carroll College game, and I left at halftime. I said, "Dad, I can't stand being a spectator. I don't want to listen to quarterbacks' jobs or guys in the stands. I want to be a coach. I'm going to go back to the University of Wyoming." I went back in the spring of 1976, and that's when I started coaching. And I learned an awful lot from the people I was around, not just the coaches, but the players that I coached. And I think a lot of the philosophy that I had at a later age, because I didn't become a head coach until I was 45 years old, had a lot to do with the mentors that I had. And the people that I had, Jim Cecil Deming, my high school coach at Helena Central Catholic, C.T. Hughley, who was an ex-colonel in the Green Berets, my offensive line coach at the University of Wyoming. I learned so much from those men beyond the scoreboard. I learned a lot about life and how you act and how you treat and relationships. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned was relationships. I was an only child, so I really didn't have an older brother or sister to kind of follow in, but I did in athletics. I had Mike Sanders, who was a year ahead of me. I had Helena Central Catholic. I had Greg Gray, who was our starting center at the University of Wyoming. He was 2 years older than me, from Chicago. So I had people take me under their wings, because at times I'm sure I was a snot-nosed kid coming from the streets of East Helena and not really knowing everything, but thinking like I did. I learned an awful lot about what it takes to show up every day by being a walk-on. I was a walk-on at the University of Wyoming. And that was in the days when I showed up for the camp the first week. We had 54 freshmen. And I'm looking around going, holy cow, we had 7 quarterbacks in that freshman class. How am I going to make it through this group? Freshmen weren't eligible in 1970. So I had to learn up, and that's when I learned to show up every day. I had to show up every day for weight workouts. I had to show up every day for meetings. I had to show up every day for extra work. I was a tight end at that time to work with the quarterbacks, just to be there to make sure that the coaches knew my name at the end of the day. And I think when I earned a scholarship, it wasn't because I was all of a sudden the best player. I outlasted a lot of guys. I think a lot of guys left. A lot of guys decided to give up football or transfer to another school, and I just outlasted everybody. But I did it by showing up every day. Now, if you ask my professors at University of Wyoming, maybe I did show up every day for some of those classes in calculus or civil engineering as a freshman, but the things I really tried to work on and the things I really tried to incorporate to what I did as a coach when I was assistant coach in 1976 under Fred Akers until I came to Carroll in 1999, were the values I learned about the relationships, and it has to do with trust, love, and humility. And I know a lot of times football coaches, and I'm sure with me it wasn't any different, love isn't always a word that's associated with a coach. But there's tough love that we talk about. And I think the thing about it when relationships, knowing that you care about someone beyond just their talent level. Now, there's 2 sides of that, because performance isn't the only thing. I wanted to learn about these young men and what they do off the field, how they handle themselves and their families. And I always took that to heart when I made home visits. I wanted to see how they acted around their parents. If I was in a room with a very talented young man, but he was very disrespectful to his mom or his siblings or something, when I walked out that door, that scholarship offer wasn't good anymore. So performance has a lot to do with it, but there's performance beyond the football field. But in our business, you get hired and fired on win percentages, right? Win-loss percentages. So performance to me is important beyond what? Potential, beyond reputation. When you're coming from high school to college, the resume that you build up, the highlight films that you have, whatever sport you're doing, and the grades that you have, that's your potential to the next step. When you leave college and you go to graduate school, whatever it may be, your potential is what you did while you're in college. But when you get to graduate school, everybody has that. Well, it's the same thing with the freshman football class coming in. Everybody has highlights. Everybody's all stay too late and everybody's all coast almost. So everybody has the press clippings. How do you separate that from someone else? By performance. Because potential, I've seen young coaches that really get hung up on that. And they'll come into me when I was an older assistant coach and a coordinator, and when I was a head coach, and they say, Coach, let's just give this guy another chance. Let's just follow with him a couple years. Well, some kids may take more than 1 or 2 years to develop. I understand that. But when they get the chance to perform, they have to perform in some capacity. They have to produce. Because in a team sport, everybody's counting on you. In football, there's 10 other players counting on you. So that's really important to me, is how do they perform? One of the things that I really try to impress upon young men, especially when I got to be head coach, is I did not treat everybody equal. Because I don't think everybody's equal. Not in God's sense they are, but not in terms of athletic performance or their backgrounds, their religion, their socioeconomic upbringing. They may play 8-man football. They may play 11-man football. They may play at a school with 40 kids. They may play at a school 5A football in the South where there's 3,000 students in that school. Not everybody was equal. But my philosophy was treat everybody fair. Because when I look at a huddle out there on the field on Saturday afternoon, that huddle isn't equal. There's 6'5", 310-pound offensive lineman. There's 5'8", Dustin Rinker out of Idaho, 190-pound running back. They're not equal. There's people with different size, shape, speed, strength, that type of thing, different backgrounds. But they all have to have one thing in common, that's to move that football. That's 11.5 inches forward. Or if you're on defense, they got to stop from moving that pigskin 11.5 inches forward. So they all have one common goal, And that's where the game of football really, I think, I was attracted to football. I loved baseball growing up. My dad was my baseball coach. But I was attracted to football because of the teamwork, because what it required for everybody being on the same page. And, you know, everybody in this state, in this community knows who Tyler Emmert is. Tyler Emmert won 2 state championships undefeated at Capitol High School. He played on, I think, 2, maybe 3 Legion state championships with the Helena Senators. What does he do when he comes to Carroll? Loses his first football game under me, but he wins 4 national championships. He was just a winner. But he did it on the heels of all those offensive linemen, on Nick Carroll, on Justin Thomas, the All-American wide receivers that we had, Casey Fitzsimmons, a tight end that played in the NFL. He brought those guys together. And what was exciting about all that, when you watched somebody to take and make other players around you better, that's what teamwork is. I don't care if it's football, if it's track and field, if it's a business, if you're a physical therapist, you're CEO of a business, whatever it is, your relationship with everybody else matters, and at the top to the bottom. And when we've been successful, wherever I've coached at, it's not just the coaches, it's just not the star player. It's the people that do the laundry, it's the people that line the football fields, the people that go out and raise money so that we can fly to different games, that we can have the nice uniforms that we have. There's so many factors that are involved in that. But who gets their name in the paper, who gets their picture in the paper? It's always coaches and players. And I learned a long time ago, coaches get way too much credit. And if you look at the NFL this year, quarterbacks get too much criticism. But that's just the nature of the beast. One of the things, there's 2 quotes that I learned at a very young age, and I mean young age as a coach, that I really loved, that I always tried to embark upon. One is, nothing great has ever been achieved without enthusiasm, and that's by Thoreau. And, you know, I can sure tell you, I'm sure Travis would tell you, my enthusiasm wasn't always contagious on the football field, whether it's practice field or games, but my enthusiasm for my job. My enthusiasm for what I did for 45 years, my enthusiasm being at practice, being at the off-season program at 5:55 a.m. in the winter months, being in the weight room, being in recruiting, those things. My enthusiasm is what kept me going every day. And it wasn't false enthusiasm. It was enthusiasm that I loved what I do. And I loved I think what I was meant to do, even though I didn't know that at a young age until I didn't learn that till later on I got out of college. The other one is a quote by Browning, and there's a movie about it, or there's a poem about it. But a man's reach should exceed his grasp. And all that means is you can have something right there in front of you, and you can reach out and you can grab it. But your reach and your dreams and what your goals have to go beyond what you can just get right here. Because right here sometimes is very attainable, but that might not be what you're meant to do. It might not be what your dreams are beyond that. It's got to go beyond what you can just see right in front of you. And that's the vision, not just for today, but for tomorrow, graduate school, whatever it is after high school, college, whatever it is, when you're getting into a business or you're joining a team for the first time. There's so much more beyond that first layer that's right there in front of you. And I learned that when I went to Wyoming. I wanted to play at the University of Wyoming since I was about 12 years old, because we didn't have ESPN or Fox Network in those days. We had one channel that showed football on Saturday, and Wyoming was in this region, so we'd get Montana, Montana State, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho State games on Saturday. And I loved watching Wyoming. There's something about that bucking horse on the side of the helmet that my core, it just resonated with me. And then they had some guys from Montana. Bob Jacobs from Bozeman was an All-American punter. Gary Fox and Ken Husted were from Billings West, great tight end and quarterback. So there were players from my neck of the woods up here in Montana that were there, so I kind of gravitated towards that. And again, that was before scholarship limits. We had freshman teams at that time, so I could go down there and prove myself on the freshman team, and then hopefully go on from there at that time. Something that's really important to me is there's a term that I don't use the word ever except when I talk about. I do not like the word overachiever. I don't believe in that. You either achieve or you're an underachiever. When I was called an overachiever once, I took it as kind of an insult. It's like, well, I'm not supposed to be that good, but I'm doing something that nobody expected. And so I didn't really like that word, overachiever. To me, if whatever I'm doing, I'm achieving. It may not be somebody else's expectations. And I can't always live up to somebody else's expectations. I got to live up to mine, but I like people setting, goals out there for me, and I want expectations of someone else at times. But I didn't want to live under that umbrella that says, well, you're an overachiever. That means that pretty soon your luck's going to run out, or you're going to get to the point where you can only go so far. So I believe achieving. What's the limit? What's the ceiling on achieving? Now, there's underachievers, for sure. And that's something that as CEOs, as businessmen, as coaches, as parents, we have to bring out in other people. We have to bring that up into them. If they're underachieving, why is it they're underachieving? It's our job to find that out rather than just push them to the side and say, well, you're no good, move on to the next one. So that part of it is something that I really try to take heart to. Excuse me. When I talk about what's being fair or not being equal, there is one thing. Does anybody know what the number 1440 means? Has anybody ever heard the number 1440 and the importance of 1440? It's a big number to me. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. That's equal. You have it, I have it. Now, my day may start at 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. the next day. It's equal for us. What we do with that 1,440 minutes is up to us, okay? I have the same opportunity to work just as hard, lift just as many weights, practice, watch film, study, work in my business, work as a parent, work as a husband or a wife, as the next person. I can't bank it. I can't say, well, I didn't use 70 of these minutes today, I'll bank them tomorrow. No, it starts over. Wherever your day starts over. So you have 1,440 minutes in a day to do what you want to do, what you're put on this earth for, to become the best version of yourself. And that's what's equal to all of us. When I sat with young people that at exit interviews after seasons, some would come in and we talk about this, we talk about that, talk about the season, and invariably there'd be, half a dozen players that would come and say, well, Coach, I didn't get an opportunity this year. You got an opportunity the day you said you were coming to the University of Wyoming, University of Massachusetts, University of Montana, or Carroll College. When you walked in that door, you said yes, your opportunity started then. What you do with that opportunity is up to you. It's not always up to coaches, not always up to your teachers, not always up to your parents. You have to do that. And that's where I don't believe, and I told every parent this, and I sat there with their sons. I am not here to motivate your sons. That's not my job. I'm here to coach, educate, but I am required and I am here to help inspire your sons. Inspiring is helping somebody become better, letting them know they're doing good, giving them a good word to work on, and also letting them know when they're not doing the things that they should be doing. That's inspiration. Motivation is more intrinsic to me. It has to come self in. When I was walking at Wyoming, I didn't need coaches to motivate me. I had to be the one that had to be under. And I didn't gain 45 pounds my junior year in high school, but I put on 15, 20 pounds each year, my freshman and sophomore years, to get to where I could be a valuable player on that field because of my size and strength. And I worked to where I was one of the top 3 strongest players on the team each year when I was there, sophomore, junior, senior year. I had to work that way. I had to do that, but I motivated myself. I didn't require anybody else to come and knock on the door and get me out of bed. I didn't require somebody else to say, oh, Mike, do this, do that. But I was inspired by older players. I was inspired by people I read about, and not even knowing it at the time in high school and college, the people that I read them, and I loved Henry Aaron, I loved Mickey Mantle in baseball, I loved Bart Starr and Ray Nitschke in football, and Elgin Baylor and Jerry West in basketball. But the people I read the most books on were college and high school football coaches and basketball coaches, whether it was John Wooden or Woody Hayes, or whether it was Bear Bryant or Bo Schembechler, it didn't make any difference. Woody Hayes had a great book that I read, and the title, it says it itself, You Win with People. You don't win with formulas. You don't win with schemes. You don't win with all these, and this deals with analytics today. I can't wrap my brain around analytics. You win with gut feelings sometimes, but you win with people. You win with the people that you have, that you recruit. You win with the people that you have, that you work and you hire in your businesses. And you win with people every day when you show up every day within your family. That's what my mom and dad did. I try to do that with my sons and my wife. as a football coach, I wasn't there every day to every one of Shane or Clay's games or the recitals or the things that they did. But I was very blessed as a football coach, as a college coach. Every day was take your son to work day. When you're a coach, you can bring him to the gym. You can bring him to the weight room. Now, there were times on bus trips when Shane and Clay sat in the back of the bus with Travis and Jeff Van Heel and Marcus Bonda. They got a heck of an education, more than they ever did at Helena Middle School or Helena High School. But that was the things that you do. You make time for that. You have to be able to separate what you're doing as a coach, sometimes as a father and a husband, and sometimes I didn't do a very good job of that. There's times I brought a bad day at practice or a linebacker that messed up, and I wasn't wasn't very good to be around me at dinner time. And I had to really work on that to make sure that when I got home, it was family time. And that's important. There's times I learn later on that, maybe I have to drive around the block and listen to another Garth Brooks song before I go in the house for dinner. And just to get my mind right, wrap it around. What am I going home for? Who am I working with? Football was here. Now it's Shane and Clay's time. It's Heidi's time. And I was very blessed to have a wonderful wife. She's all pro. And there's always a saying years ago, behind every successful man, there's a great woman. Well, I don't believe in that. She was never behind me. She was alongside of me. And a lot of times she was out in front of me, but she was never behind me. What's your attitude? Attitude and gratitude. You hear so much more about it, I think, these days. What's your attitude? And who determines your attitude? It's very easy at times, if things aren't going right, to let somebody else determine your attitude, and you can't do that. It's like attitude and motivation to me go hand in hand. I have to provide the motivation for me to do the things I need to do, and my attitude has to be directed from within, not by somebody else. If I let other people determine my attitude, sometimes it's not going to be very good. And we all know this too, misery loves company, right? I don't know how many times, not a lot of times, but when you're a coach or you're a parent, when somebody gets in trouble with it, they never got in trouble by themselves. They always found a cohort to get in trouble with, because it's a lot easier to walk in Coach Van Diest's office if there's 2 or 3 of them than walk in by themselves. So you always want to have somebody around when some of those things go bad, that you can have somebody to kind of, take the brunt of Coach Van Diest's lecture, when you go in his office. But who shapes your attitude? Who does the things for you that you should be doing for yourself? Now, attitudes can be, they can grow a lot by being around the right people, being around the right mentor. And I think each one of you, at some point in time, like I have, is saying, okay, who's my role model? Who am I looking up to? And I had my parents, I had older players when I was in high school and certainly in college, and there's other people that were role models. But there comes a point in time when I think it's more important to say, why can't I be a role model? And that's not an ego thing, but why is it that what I'm doing every day, why can't that be directed towards somebody else to see how you should live a life? Our players that won those championships is a great compliment. And the team celebration and the feeling and the accomplishment of all that hard work is great. But 99% of those guys accomplish something greater than a national championship. Whether they're lawyers, they're engineers, they're teachers, they're coaches, they're husbands, they're fathers. That is beyond, if I talk about beyond, it transcends beyond the scoreboard. They did so many great things. They did so many great things, certainly as student athletes. But that's a short chapter in their life. And that's the hardest part with some athletes. It's the hardest part with some people that they're noted for this. And I've had a couple players that have really struggled post-playing days when I was at Wyoming or Montana or Carroll College, wherever it may be, that when they were done playing, who were they? And it was hard for me when I retired. I coached for 45 years. That was my lifeline. And then when you retire, it's like, it's hard. My social life is going to Costco and seeing people. It's a whole different attitude now. But it was great because I had a wife that was hard working. I had 2 sons that are doing great. So when I used to go out to Roster Grade School where Heidi's teaching, I wasn't Coach Van Diest out there. I was Mrs. Van Diest's husband. And so that kind of put things in perspective too in what you're doing. And I think that's an important thing, that you want to be able to look at yourself beyond who you are rather than just what you do. But it's hard. And, you know, and I was always the guy that would talk to athletes afterwards and try to help them through it. And then in 2000, after the 2018 season, I retired, and I couldn't stay retired, so I coached again. So I was like Michael Jordan. I did another retirement this year. You know, it's hard. It's just hard because all of a sudden, the things that I had confidence in doing, I'm not doing anymore. And my son, my oldest son, Shane, who is a great father, he's one of the best ever. He's always given me a bad time because I never had any hobbies. Well, I could go spend, I won't say 4 hours on a golf course. It'd probably be 6 hours on a golf course where I play. I go do that, or I can spend time with my kids. I can take them fishing. I go hang out with them. I go hang out with Heidi. I didn't have hobbies besides football because I wanted to spend time with my kids and my wife when I had the free time. I loved playing slow pitch when I was a young coach. When I was a single coach, it was great playing slow pitch softball. But when I got married, I'm not going to do that anymore because that took a lot of time. 2-3 nights a week, tournaments every weekend. So I just had to prioritize things. And I know I took a leadership class on campus up here with John Seck a couple years ago. And we got talking about life skills. And one of the questions that came up from the students was, well, Coach, how do you balance your life, family life, and football? Well, what does balance mean to you? Balance means to me it's even, right? You sit on a teeter-totter, you balance something, and it's even. There was no balance in my life. There was times, you know, I always talked about the 4 F's that were my favorite F's was faith, family, friends, football. Well, sometimes football went to the top of that. And other times family went to the top of that. So I couldn't ever really balance it. How can you balance football and my family life during football season when we're working 80, 90 hours a week? And we used to work 120 days in a row without a day off. That's just the way we were wired. That was our DNA. Same with football players. There's very few days they did get off. And athletes, whether you're track or basketball, or whatever your business may be, you may study. You go to college. You don't get days off from PT school, do you? You won't get days off from graduate school or law school or medical school. So how do you balance it? It's not so much balancing as is more prioritizing it. What are the things that are important? And how do you prioritize your time compared to what you used to doing for 45 straight years? And then all of a sudden, wow, there's 24 hours in a day and I'm not watching film? Well, the truth is I still watch film. I still watch about 2 hours, 3 hours of film a day. Happiness within is so important. And I learned this, through my faith. There's a difference between joy and pleasure. Pleasure is instant, and pleasure doesn't last. Pleasure for me is a pan of chocolate chip cookies or brownies and a half a gallon of milk. That I can make it last a little bit, but not as much as joy of something else. Joy of watching my boys do well what they're doing, watching my son as a father, watching my other younger son as the head hockey coach in college, seeing the things that my wife does as a teacher, sitting in her classroom, observing what she does with third graders every day and appreciating that part of it. That's joy to me. There's a difference, and I think people get messed up on that. Because pleasure is right now, and you think this is great, but how long does that last? And what is true pleasure? It's not true joy. Joy is what we have in our faith. Joy is what we have in our families. Joy is what we have in our relationships. And I think that's so important about that. What's so much different now than when I grew up in East Helena in the 50s and 60s. We had party lines. You don't even know. Young people don't know what party lines are on your phones. We had phones. You had party lines. There could be two different families that had the same phone number as you, and if you picked up a telephone and somebody was on it, you had to hang up, or you just listen to, and gossip about it later. But you had party lines. There was no social media. You had two maybe channels, Helen and the Great Falls channel on your TV. And you know what you had to do? You had to get up and turn the channel. You couldn't sit there and say, well, I can flick through the commercials and go to the next channel. You got to sit through the channels. You got to get up and turn it yourself and suffer through some of those commercials. Life was different and it was simpler, but there were some disadvantages too. Social media is so hard for young people and old people because There's haters and shamers out there. And that's what's hard for me. My sons put me on Facebook a few years ago just to try to get me updated. After 2 years, I took myself off of it because I didn't want to know what everybody else was doing all the time. I didn't want to know about some of my really good friends from high school and college and seeing their political views that come up on there. I thought Facebook would be just where people get back and talk and forth about the good things they do. That wasn't it. So I got off of Facebook. But every time you put something out there, you have to expect there's going to be something that's going to disagree with you. There are haters and shamers, and it makes them feel good about themselves. And you can do one of two things. You can really take it to heart, and that's kind of like social bullying, or you can discount it. Just somebody I don't know is going to say something about me. I could care less. You know, if they want to come and say it to my face, that's one thing. But if there's something on social media, somebody says something to me they don't like about me, but I don't even know them, who cares? That doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. And then what do? You get in back and forth, you know, and I learned from a coach one time, you never want to get into a battle with a skunk. So you don't want to ever go back and forth with that, you know. Just go ahead and let things go and feel good about yourself. And that's what we need to do. And that's our job, too, for other people, make people feel good about themselves. That's where inspiration comes from, no matter what the case may be. You don't have to lie to them. You don't have to sugarcoat it. You don't have to blow smoke. But to be genuine and to let them know you care about things, I think, is so important. And that's what our job is. And that's why I think each one of you, just like myself, when I think about it, I know Bob is a great example of this, and Matthew is this, and Kelly, you're role models. You're role models. And, you know, when you're an athlete, and Baxter, you probably learned this, and Sid, you probably learned this too, some coach might have told you to be careful what you do when you're middle school or high school, because there's always little eyes watching you. There's somebody's little brother or sister, or your little brother or sister, and what do? They want to be just like you. Well, if you do something wrong, they're going to do it because they think it's okay. If they're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, you're a role model without even knowing it. But carry that on as you get older. Carry that on even beyond just that part of your life, because you can walk down the street, and I'll brag about my one son, Clay, when he was in middle school here at Helena Middle School. He overheard a girl one day talking about, I think it's 7th grade, I can't remember 7th or 8th grade, but 7th grade. She wanted to commit suicide. She's talking to a group of her friends. And right away, he went to a counselor that he had confidence in. And they went and pulled her out, got her some help, things like that. She didn't talk to him for a long time. I mean, it was like she just, you know, he took her trust away. A year later, she came back and thanked him, because you care about somebody. And it wasn't like one of his best friends. It was just somebody he knew. And I don't know if he had a class with her or just sitting in there in this, you know, lunchroom or something. But there's so many things you can do for each other. And we're at Helena Middle School one year, and we'd always take our football team. I'll leave it with this story here and ask this question. But we'd take our football team down the week before we'd go off to the national championship game, because it was always right around Christmas time. We always played around the 20th, 21st, 22nd, somewhere there. We came down to middle school, because Helena Middle School at that time, Casey Malloy had a situation where he'd come in and they'd bring people from the community to stand at the doors, all the entrances of the middle school, and welcome kids come in the morning and say hi to them, ask them how their day is. So we'd take our football players down there, and they'd wear their jersey, and they'd say, how's your day? How's this going on? And good luck today. Have fun. Merry Christmas. And we're getting ready to leave our third year there, and we're getting ready to leave, and I'm the last one out, and the players are gone to get them back to class and stuff. And I'm walking out, and this girl comes up and grabs me. She says, Coach, can I tell you something? I said, sure. She says, I just want to thank you for bringing your players by today. She said, one of your players welcomed me and one of my friends to the door, but she said, your player asked me what my name was, what our names were. And she said, other than my best friend in school, there's been nobody in this school that's ever asked me my name. And so it's just like, you don't even know it sometimes. And on the other flip side of it, you can just pass somebody up and walk right by them and not know it either. And that can be a negative consequence on that side. So those are just a few thoughts in terms of what I believe in, what I try to do. And trust me, I've probably failed at all of these dozens of times, and I learned from it. But I've had a lot of good people that stuck by me. I was blessed everywhere I've coached that there's been good people, there's been good players. I wish I could say I made a positive impact on all of them. I'm sure I haven't. I know some I haven't. But I enjoyed the relationship with the other coaches. I enjoyed the relationship with other coaches in the department that coach basketball, or track, softball, whatever. And getting to know athletes from other sports was a real blessing too, being a college coach and being at a small college like this. Because when I was at Northwestern in the Big Ten, I didn't know coaches in any other sport because we were off on our own island over there, so to speak, in our football facility. And I didn't know the other athletes. And at Carroll, at Wyoming, Massachusetts, Montana, I got to know athletes across the board and coaches across the board, and that was a blessing too. So rather than me going on anymore and putting anybody to sleep, any questions or anything else that I've talked about that maybe I can expound more on, or questions that you guys have? Put it on you. You're a plainsman. Come on.
I have a question. What would you say is the key to, as a leader, making or building new leaders?
Well, I believe this. I never liked the term, and that's a great question because I should have talked about that. I don't believe that there's natural born leaders. I think you learn to be a leader. But I think number one, you have to learn to lead yourself first. If you can't lead yourself by your own beliefs, by your own integrity, the things that you do, it's hard to lead other people because young people can see through that. They can tell what coaches, what bosses, what professors are really, truly, sincere about. They care about it beyond more than just a grade or beyond a performance. But a good leader, I think, number one, has to lead themselves, and then they have to care about other people. And that goes back to, do they love who they're working with? Are they humble? Can you trust that person? You can't trust somebody as a leader if you don't have that trust there. They're not a very good leader, And I think that's one of the things that you talk about building relationships and the attitude and gratitude. Is a leader's interest self-serving, or is it for the betterment of the program or the team? Okay. And I think that's so important, Paul. I don't know if that answers your question or gives you enough to build on, but it's about how do you present yourself to others and how do they feel about you? And is it a leader just to stand up on a soapbox and say, I'm the head coach or I'm the CEO of this business? No, that's not it. The titles don't make you a leader. Leaders can be the freshman walk-on your football team. It can be low man on the totem pole in your business by how they present themselves. Do they care about others? Because there's some, and they say bad leaders. If they're bad, they're not leaders to me. And we can get into politics or non-politics, coaches or non-coaches. But there are some bad people in those professions, in those titles and positions, but they're not good leaders because they're self-serving. And it's all about them, and it's not about what they can do. It's about them promoting themselves to get to the next job. And I've worked with coaches that, they're coaches, but they're more interested in the next job and moving up in the ladder in the profession than they were about where they're at. And I think that shows. And twice I've turned down opportunities to make a lot more money than when I was at the University of Wyoming. Our coaching staff was going to go to Purdue, and I was going to make twice as much money at Purdue than at Wyoming. But I played at Wyoming. And I wasn't the savior, but I saw a lot of coaches go through Wyoming as kind of a stepping stone. I said, well, I'm a Wyoming graduate. If I don't stay here, who's ever going to stay here and coach? And I wasn't the head coach, but I was assistant coach. And I stayed. And it was more about the players and about where my family lived. And then I came to Carroll. I had 2 opportunities to move up to Division I schools as a head coach and make a lot more money. But it wasn't the best time for my family to move. Not for my wife, not for my 2 sons. So, being a leader, I think, has to do with how your relationship is built and what is it that you see yourself as a leader. Is it about the title or is it about a relationship? As head coach, I'm just like the guy that was a 3rd string quarterback. No difference. I had to make decisions. And I'm the one that could yell at the refs. The 3rd string quarterback couldn't. I had that in my bookcase. One thing, just let me go with this real quick. We put a thing together, the 10 C's of Carroll College. And it's real quick. I'm not going to talk about each one of them, but character was important to us. Courage. Being competitive, being committed, having compassion, being a part of a community. Are you coachable? How well you communicate? And communicate, I had to learn this as a head coach. It's not just me always talking, it's about listening. Communication is probably more about listening than it is always about talking. And then the last two go hand in hand. For every choice you make, there's what? Consequence. Now, not all bad choices, not all consequences are bad. But every time you make a choice, it affects someone else, and there's a consequence, and you have to understand that consequence. Because you can make a choice for pleasure, what's the consequence that goes for that? You can make a choice for joy, what's the consequence for that? I can make a choice for Mike Van Diest. How's that affect my family? So those are things I think that, those are 10 things that we just try to talk about our players with and try to get them to understand that, you know, it comes, and every coach has their mission statement, things like that. I didn't want to put a big mission statement up, but it was easier to memorize 10 C's than it was a paragraph of things. Anything else?
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for your attention. Thanks for being attentive. I appreciate it. And thanks for lunch, Kelly. And best wishes always. If I can ever do anything, just, you know, it can be as informal as it wants, or if there's things you can give me. I've learned a lot listening to Bob talk a couple different times. And Matthew's taken care of my rotator cuff a number of years back when I was very athletic, falling down Guad Hill. So there's things I can learn from everybody. And I was very blessed to be a coach when Nick Carroll was playing for us, and he was a great wide receiver. And so there's a lot of things go around. It goes around. So God bless you, and Merry Christmas to everyone. Thanks.